Welcome to Real Estate Radio Power Investing, an informative and engaging hour discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate investing. Your host, Tom K. Wilson, provides you with insight and guidance from his years of experience as a successful real estate entrepreneur on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate, and much more. Now, here's your host for Real Estate Radio Power Investing, Tom K. Wilson.
Thanks for tuning in to our Real Estate Radio Power Investing program, where we empower you with the education to maximize your investing success. We're broadcasting from the Silicon Valley corporate headquarters of Wilson Investment Properties, the sponsor of Real Estate Radio Power Investing. I'm Tom K. Wilson, your host for this weekly radio show on multifamily and commercial investing and syndications. If you can't make our live show, you can catch our podcast on wilsoninvest.com. You can also go to BACOM, BACOMM.club for information on free monthly education meetup venue on commercial and multifamily investing with world-class speakers. Our program today is about commercial and multifamily products and syndications with Robert Helms. We'll introduce him in a moment. You can go on wilsoninvest.com and sign up for our newsletter that gives you a update on the economics that apply to real estate on every other week basis. And it also gives you access to the syndications that Wilson Investment Properties offers, most of which are only available to those who are connected with us and part of our client base. You can get these syndications, which are for $50,000 a share typically, and these are quality cash flowing typically products in the different asset classes and across the country. And we always welcome your questions and suggestions for future programs. So we're going to like to introduce Robert Helms. I've had the great pleasure of knowing for 20 years. And he's the host and founder of the Real Estate Guys radio show, the longest running and most popular real estate program in the world. Downloaded in 193 countries now, some crazy number like that. My gosh, I think you're rivaling Robert Kiyosaki in his book sales. He started off as a high school and college DJ, which is understandable when you hear his voice. If you haven't already met or heard Robert and his podcast, he founded an audio production company that worked with notable speakers like Jim Rohn and Brian Tracy. He's born into a real estate family. Started off as a property manager. That real estate family is the godfather of Bob Helms, who's been a good friend of mine for just as long. Another one of those that transferred from high tech to the real estate world. Although Bob Helms figured it out a little bit sooner than I did. I hung around for 30 years in high tech before I moved over, but I was buying along the way. And so he had 18 years in residential brokerage with his father and top 1% of agents. Current real estate investor, syndicator, and a $300 million developer. Highly sought after educator and speaker. Indeed he is, and we're very pleased and honored and proud to have him here with us today.
Hey, Tom, thanks for having me today.
Indeed. We've spent a lot of time together over the years, and it's about time we get you on the program, so that's wonderful.
I've been waiting. I'm glad I finally got the call.
Boy, we just are coming off the 17th annual Summit at Sea. And I've been there the last 8 years, and our director of marketing at Wilson Investment Properties, Jennifer, has been with us the last 3. And it's just an amazing experience that just expands our knowledge and our relationships more and more every year. It just seems like it just keeps getting better. So, Robert, this year we had speakers that not only talked a lot about real estate, but also talked about the other things that you need to have in your spectrum of experience and knowledge in order to make good decisions. So you might talk about that a little bit and how you transition from pre-crash to just focusing on mostly rental houses to the breadth of things that they offer now for our education?
I think all investors make an evolution, and some people do the same thing over and over and have success with that. If it's not broken, don't fix it. But at the same time, most real estate investors, I find, kind of do evolve in their thinking, in their appetite, as they get better at what they do, and as they have better relationships, they see different opportunities. And we have certainly evolved. Before the crash, we were very much attending real estate events, speaking at real estate events, going to real estate events, often visiting with folks who are in single family, multifamily properties primarily. But we didn't really see the crash coming. And when we re-engineered that, there were lots of folks who did. So we made
well, to be fair to you, not a lot, a few.
That's true. That's true.
You sought out those few, so it feels like a lot now, right?
And that's it. A lot of people will claim that they saw it coming. But
you've always done a great job of surrounding yourself with experts and those that got it right, and you always are more interested in I think, getting it right than being right.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the key, getting around people that think differently, have a different perspective. If we all think the same way, then we're only going to go down one path. So having that different perspective is huge. And we started hanging out at more economic conferences, looking at the broader picture. And I believe that before you're a real estate investor, you're an investor. You want to put hard earned money to work and have it come back with friends, with a return. And that's true for all investors, whether they're stock investors, mutual fund investors, oil and gas investors. I think real estate has some very distinct advantages. But again, if you're not versed in the other types of places people can put their money, then you don't have a good compared to what. Mm-hmm. Real estate can be great, but if you're so focused on real estate that you're excluding every other possibility, then maybe you're missing some things. And so we try to get our brains around lots of different investment types and opportunities, mostly so we can feel centered on the decisions that we make. I think every investor has what we call a personal investment philosophy. The reason that they're investing is different than everybody else. The resources they have, their timeline, their amount of risk they'll accept, all those things. And so it's not about what somebody else does in real estate investing. It's about figuring out the true you and what you want real estate to do for you.
So when the crash happened and you found out that you had maybe not understood the timing as well as you could have, you then decided to surround yourself with people and learn how to determine real estate cycles and just economic cycles in general. And so that's why now on the Summit at Sea, we've got a lot of folks who are very smart about the economy.
Yeah,
including Peter Schif and Dr. Doug Duncan and a lot of amazing people.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of that's been just to seek out where we had these blind spots. Everyone can make money when the market's going up. And we were making a lot of money when the market was going up.
We really look like geniuses, don't we?
I know, I tell you, back in 2005, we could do no wrong. And then a funny thing happened, right? It was all great right until it wasn't great. And a lot of folks saw it coming. Peter Schif is one. In his book, Crash Proof, 2006, he published pretty much the exact reason for the crash. And he was ridiculed. He went on stage at several events and was warning people, and everyone laughed at him. And he turned out to be 100% accurate. And so I always say, Peter's always right. Eventually. But the challenge is when you're a perma bear like he is, or the sky is always falling, you also miss some stuff. So we're not in that camp at all. We're very optimistic, very pro real estate, always taking action, always adding to our portfolio. But we're a lot more prudent about it today. And I think we're prepared more for a downturn today than we've ever been.
And in my circle of experts at the time, my good friend Bruce Norris, who's is a rock star on the West Coast, also in parallel at the same time, Peter Schif did called the crash not only correctly but for the right reason, right? And that makes a difference. So
yeah.
So he saved hundreds of his followers millions of dollars, including myself.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was going to crash, but I sure didn't know when and why this was happening. And so for an analytical person, an engineer, it's we like to understand why,
yeah, sure.
Not just see crystal ball. So as a consequence now on the Summit at Sea, which is a 9-day conference, which is really a conference on a boat. It's referred to as a cruise because And everybody tries to defend that when they come home, and all their friends want to know, how was the cruise? They're like, well, it isn't really, but, that's a hard sell. It is a ship, but it's a wonderful experience where the information content and relationship content is just outstanding. So this year, I'd say you had like 50% real estate content, and the rest of it was in economics. It was in different kinds of real assets that you can invest in, like agriculture and metal and oil and gas, and even you have on speakers who can talk about self-sufficiency and how do you emotionally think about how do I handle a downturn and be prepared in case you have a really worst case situation happen. I'd much rather have a worst case.
That, right?
Yeah. It's much better to be prepared for the worst and not have to deal with it than the other way around.
Well, that's such a good point. We often make the case, as our friend Simon Black does, that if you take a few prudent steps to protect yourself against a downturn and nothing ever happens, you're no worse off for taking those few prudent steps. But if you don't take those few prudent steps and then something happens, you'll regret it, especially if you had some knowledge of it. You can almost give a hall pass to people that weren't paying attention and didn't really notice, and they're getting up every day, going to work and putting their money in somebody else's hands to manage. And people get by that way. And then when something bad happens, they, aren't happy about it, but they're still doing what they have to do to live, thrive, and survive. For those of us that are managers of other people's money, it's even more important that we're prudent with that. That's a big part of the reality of real estate being such a tangible and real asset.
Okay, good stuff. And we'll be back in just a moment after the break with Robert Helms, the founder of the Real Estate Guys Radio and the radio podcast.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Power Investing. Streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, visit TomWilsonProperties.com. That's TomWilsonProperties.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Power Investing, Tom K. Wilson.
Okay, we're back on Real Estate Radio Power Investing with Robert Helms today, the founder of the Real Estate Guys Radio and of the radio broadcast, which is the #1 downloaded podcast on real estate investing in the world. 193 countries now.
Yeah, and counting. It's crazy. You didn't know there were that many countries, but people listen all over the world. It's so humbling and amazing. It's our 22nd year of broadcast. We started in the Bay Area, still on the Bay Area and on the radio, and now on a lot of Salem stations, plus the podcast. It's just amazing what's happened. We go on the summit every year, and I completely lose my voice. So I'm happy to have just enough of it left to be on your program. But it's great. I've just met people all over the world that come up and say, I recognize your voice. It's the craziest thing.
Well, you certainly have a good radio voice, and we both have been told to have pretty good pipes, so it's fun. So I was broadcasting starting at 12 years old because I am radio operator, and it was a big deal to even reach and talk to 100 countries back then, which is one of the things hams like to do. But wow, to have people listen to you in all those countries. So what do you think is the appeal, the great appeal of the Real Estate Guys Radio? What do you think you've done that others have not to make it so popular?
We think about that a lot. I mean, we started as just a local radio show in a market where we talked about housing and investment. And today it's grown into kind of this international show that focuses on all aspects of real estate, different asset classes, different ways to invest, and broader picture economics like we were discussing, because I think you need to be well-rounded in all of that so you can make good decisions in your real estate portfolio. And I think a lot of it is, we're not gurus. We're not guys that do the seminar circuit and have products to sell and all that. We're really more like journalists. So we have a lot of great guests, and we look for a variety of topics. And a lot of it just resonates. We have an amazing opportunity to sit with people that are just brilliant and, do our best to pull out some of those secret bullets, if you will. And it's been just a humbling experience. And I think what happens is that if you do good quality work, people eventually find it and they start to tell other people. And I mean, more people that were referred by somebody else than anything else. And I also think that, the way people consume content has changed so much, right? It used to be traditional radio was everything. And today, that's broadcasting to a broad audience. Today, podcasting is really narrow casting. You're reaching a specific audience that raises their hand saying, I'm interested in the topic. And like with our show, there may be episodes where we get a lot more downloads because of the guest or because of the topic. And that's great. People can pick and choose what they want.
And sometimes it's predictable and sometimes it's not, right?
Oh, my gosh, yes. That's the part that surprises you. And so we just put it all out there and people will gravitate to what they enjoy. And we're also big believers that we don't hold the corner of the market on content, that there's a lot of great shows out there and people should listen to a lot of things, not just one set of voices. We have a perspective and a history that we like to share, but we also are always eager to talk to folks that are doing something new or different. Right this year on the summit, we had a new faculty member that blew our mind. And when he was talking about, I'm like, I've got to get this guy in front of the group because it's so different. And those are the kinds of things that we look for. Is you've got to get the predictable base hits, the basics of real estate. And sometimes people get a little bored of that, but we try to keep it fresh and bring in new voices and new perspectives. But at the same time, we get exposed to new ideas that way, too, by listening to a lot of different voices.
If I may say, and I'm one of your longest time and biggest fans for sure, and I've certainly tried to emulate in real estate radio power investing some of the things that I think have made you successful, and that certainly includes having great guests, great topics that are popular and of interest at the time. Two, you do just a wonderful job, I think, of pulling out the essence of their expertise and what they want to share. And unlike a lot of interviewers who are trying to make themselves look good by tripping up the guest, you're doing just the opposite. You really put them on a platform so they can shine and be their best.
We get so many great people that have a wealth of experience, and we get an hour with them. So and
it's about them, not about us, right?
It has to be about them. That's what people are interested in. And I think a lot of folks, like, they script their shows, and sometimes you have to do that, and you have to have an idea going in. Some guests want to know what you're going to ask. But I'm always in the moment. I just have a conversation with people, and they never know where it's going to go. And sometimes that's where the magic comes out. I like to have an idea of the topic and the guest and their history, and have that in my back pocket. But at the same time, I've learned to kind of go with whatever direction the guest goes, because there's great nuggets that fall out of their mouth sometimes when you go down a trail, and we look for those things for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I think another thing that you do well, that we certainly try to do on our Baycom Club and on our radio show, is that educate, not sell from those platforms. If you educate people, and people appreciate that, I think people really appreciate getting information that where they don't feel like and in any moment they're going to try to sell me something, right? And I think that's so. After a while, they get used to that. No, if I tune in, it's not going to be an upsell. It's going to be they're trying to genuinely give me good content. Right?
Yeah, and that's always for all kinds of folks. That's always the trade-off. We have what we call the Come List Me shows, which are people host a local show in their marketplace because they're looking for listings and sales. And that's great. I mean, that's perfectly a valid way to add some value and some insight, and you get to know somebody via the radio show and think, hey, maybe they could do a job for me, selling my house. That's not us. We don't list or sell properties. We don't broker deals. We don't do any of that. Instead, we point to great people. We find great people out in the community and the world that are doing good business and say, hey, if you're interested in this area, here's some folks that are doing it right. And we don't guarantee, and we don't, fully vet, but we do spend time with people, and we make sure that, at least at the surface level, that they know what they're talking about. We often go see their projects. If you'll listen to our show, you'll notice that virtually every interview I do is face-to-face. I hardly ever do a call-in interview. And it's not because we don't have lots of great guests willing to call in. It's because it takes a little extra effort to be there in person like we are today. But it's such a stronger connection when you have real time with somebody. It's subtle too. We've had a couple of call-in guests because it's had to be that way. We've had Donald Trump on our show twice, and I hesitate to use that name because now he's President Trump, but it was way before that when he was just real estate guy Trump. And the first time we had him on, he insisted on being a phone interview, which is great. The second time we saw him in person. And so over time, you develop relationships with people, not on the phone, but face to face. And I think that's a big part of real estate, is that it's a numbers business, it's a market business, but it's also a people business.
Today, so many companies, so many things are virtual. But just like I guess you can date online, right? But until you meet that person, or if you're talking to an expert, there's just that human connection. If you're with each other and you can kind of see your body language and just get more of a connect, I think you get more genuine content that way.
Well, and it's like what you do at Baycom. I love the fact that you bring people together, real people in a real room who hear information and then have a chance to digest it, to debate it, to talk about it, to ask questions. That's where real learning happens. It doesn't happen by just listening and absorbing or reading. That's not, that's head knowledge. But seat knowledge that really propels you to action is when you go out and do the thing. You and I just spent 9 days with Robert Kiyosaki, and he always talks about the cone of learning. At the bottom of the cone of learning, where you retain 10%, is when you sit and listen to a lecture. The top of the cone of learning, where you retain 90%, is when you actually do the event. And what he does is he takes us through simulations, like playing the cash flow game, where it is similar to the real world, and you have the experience of going through it, and you retain it better. So that's why I love case studies. When you look at properties and they're in the rearview mirror, so you see what happened, what went right, what didn't. We had a couple of those on the summit this year that were great to watch. When there's a challenge, not if, but when there's a challenge, how real people handle it, that can be gold.
Okay, we're going to take a break here for a moment, and when we come back, we're going to ask Robert for a few takeaways from Summit at Sea, and then we're going to talk about commercial and multifam. So stay with us here on Real Estate Radio Power Investing.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Power Investing. Streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, visit TomWilsonProperties.com. That's TomWilsonProperties.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Power Investing, Tom K. Wilson.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Power Investing. We have Robert Helms today, the founder and co-host of the Real Estate Guys radio program. And we're talking about the Summit at Sea, how people get their information, how valuable it is to have a breadth of information and content today, not just one narrow aspect of what you're interested in, what you're currently making money at. So Robert, can you give us a couple of takeaways? One, I want you to just mention about Joe Quirk, who you brought on at the last minute. That was such a mind expander that maybe most people were not going to engage in, but it makes them think a lot more. Let's talk about that. Let's do that first, and then I want to ask you about what's your takeaway about where we are economically and where you think we're headed.
So one of our summiteers, that's what we call people who come to the summit. This was his 13th summit. And about 3 weeks before the summit, he said, I just met this guy. We got to figure out how to get him on the summit. This talk is amazing.
And that's really easy because you have a lot of open space and you're tendering at this stage of the game, right?
Well, that's the problem, right? We were sold out of cabins. We thankfully had a cancellation, which you hate when that happens, but it freed up a cabin for this gentleman. 10 years ago, Patrick Friedman, who's Milton Friedman's grandson, and Peter Thiel, who, of course, folks in the Bay Area will know, came together and started this nonprofit organization about seasteading, the Seasteading Institute. Joe Quirk is the president of the Seasteading Institute.
Seasteading? What the heck is that?
Like homesteading, but on the ocean. Here's his premise. More than 60% of the Earth's surface is not controlled by any government. And that's where the water is. And as you know, property rights don't extend over the water. So it creates this really interesting idea. The metaphor he uses, ironically, is a cruise ship. A cruise ship is like a floating city that has everything you need: food, beverage, entertainment, medical, security. Everything. And it runs under the guide of the captain.
But it doesn't have traditional government, right?
Not traditional government, exactly. And so the rules that are established, the rule of law and the rule of commerce and all that are established, one by the country the ship is registered in, which is usually not the U.S., it's a company like Liberia or a country like Liberia or Malta or a place like that. And then the final say is with the captain. the captain makes a lot of decisions. Like, for instance, the captain decides whether or not we're going to stay on ship time or if we're going to change our clock so it matches the port. And that's a decision the captain makes. And every captain is different. So he used that analogy as this idea that we have this functioning society for a week where if you misbehave, there's a way to deal with it. If things go well, if people have needs and wants and just that whole thing. And the idea of seasteading is to colonize the oceans in a way that people can create not only their own living environment, but essentially their own government. And it's fascinating. So there's the technological side, which they've been working on forever.
And there's a sociological side of it.
Yeah. And so it was fascinating. I put Joe on first faculty member out of the gate just to jar people. And it was amazing.
Us veterans of the summit were kind of blown away. I can't imagine what all of the new folks showing up this year thought. Oh my gosh, if this is how they're starting, where's this thing going?
Yeah.
They found out. Pretty amazing.
Crazy stuff.
So I enjoyed Joe so much. I had dinner with him one night, and I thought, boy, I think our people would be inspired by him also. So I invited him. He'd already agreed to come down and speak at one of our Baycom events.
That's awesome. This is, again, 10 years ago, they started this movement, and the very first seastead was just launched 6 weeks before the summit. And he brought video of it. We got to meet the inhabitants of it. I just got an email from him yesterday that he's now sold his second seastead. And there's 2 or 3 people interested after that. And so it's a bigger topic that we cover today, but it's one of the ideas that you have to be open to new ideas, the air, without necessarily abandoning what you're doing currently, the shiny penny syndrome. So we always want to bring, new ideas to folks and really just to get your mind going, get the juices flowing.
So what's your current thought now about where we stand economically, what our biggest risks are, where we're headed? I think you have, don't you, the exact time and day that the recession is going to start?
I have the date and time available, so you can email me for that. I tell you what, a couple years ago, you were kind enough to invite Dr. Doug Duncan to come and speak at the summit, and he's spoken twice, and I know he's at Baycom coming up. I think one of the things you always want to be looking at is the horizon, and he's great at that. And, last year at the summit, he talked about how we're pretty long in this recovery, if you want to call it that.
And I'll never forget the first words out of his mouth. You remember what they were?
No.
All expansions end.
Oh, all expansions end.
That's
right.
when Peter Schiff's and Robert Kiyosaki's heads jerked up.
Yeah.
They assumed he was going to be just lip service from Capitol Hill. And of course, you were calibrated on me. We've known each other a long time. You knew I wasn't going to bring somebody to give lip service. And all expansions in.
In fact, we had lunch that day, and one of the things he shared is, you know this, but the fact that he only took the job because he got to say what he's found, and he's not hampered by that. They
promised he wouldn't censor him.
Yeah,
and he says that they have not.
Yeah, and so here's the deal: the cycles are inevitable. What goes up must come down. There's never been an expansion that hasn't ended, and it's not going to be like that. And I think people can figure it out. They're sniffing around now, and a lot of folks are leery of the stock market like never before. Not saying you want to get out of the stock market, but you just want to be more prudent and more careful. Thankfully, there is more information available today. I think my biggest takeaway was just the degree to which you can be prepared. And we heard it from lots of different speakers. Robert brought on a last-minute guest. Literally the day before, he says, "Hey, I just had this guy on my radio show, and he'd be awesome to have speak. And he lives in Florida, where we're leaving. Would you be able to make some time on stage?" I'm like, "Of course." And his whole thing, Ted Seidel's his name, and he is one of the experts on forensic accounting of pensions. And there's this huge challenge that...
Wonder why there'd be a need for that.
Yeah, I know. that governments, local and state governments, and public pensions as well as private pensions, that's a challenge. And so it's a self-reliance message that if you're expecting the government or your company to take care of you, I think you need to wake up. I think you need to figure out that nobody cares as much about you and your future as you do. And it was crazy. One night we watched this documentary aboard the ship on the pensions, and there are states that are so tremendously underfunded that the folks who worked hard for 30, 40 years to fund these pensions are going to just be out of luck. And that's a terrible reality, but there is no free lunch. There is no bailout coming. And I think the sad reality of that is people are going to have to figure out what their retirement years are going to look like. The great news is real estate can be one of the best tools there is to ensure that you have a meaningful and productive financial life beyond your working years.
So stay with us on Real Estate Radio Power Investing with Robert Helms. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Power Investing. Streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, visit TomWilsonProperties.com. That's TomWilsonProperties.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Power Investing, Tom K. Wilson.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Radio Power Investing program with Robert Helms today in studio. So would you say one of your takeaways is that yes, all expansions end. There are certainly indications, and we had experts there that I would say we're in common agreement that sometime in the next several months, we're probably going to pass the peak.
Yeah.
And of course, it's not the same for everything. Different asset classes and different markets are not all exactly in phase.
Right.
However, there are things you can do about it. And and I think, at least my conclusion, you let me know if you agree, is that putting your money into real assets and maybe a diversity of assets, whether it be a variety of real estate or into oil and gas and agriculture and metals, and having a diversity in real assets is one of the best things you can do to defend yourself.
Yeah, and it has been. If you go back and study the last few times this happened, obviously everybody remembers 2008, but that wasn't the only crash. If you go back and study, the things that have inherent value, true, real assets, always hold their value. They may not stay at the same value, but one of the things to consider is that the asset value of multifamily real estate took a hit in the downturn, but the rents didn't by much. Rents did not go plummeting, even though prices did. And the price that a property sells for only matters two times: if you're going to refinance it or if you're going to sell it. If I own a 200-unit apartment building and my tenants are paying the rent, to me, what the value of that building is at any given time doesn't mean anything to me.
And indeed, that's how the lender bases the value. Right?
Yep. So we saw a lot of history looking at the last crash. So real assets of any kind make sense. Derivatives and speculation and empty promises, those do not. And unfortunately, a lot of people are invested in those kind of vehicles that there's nothing underpinning it. And I think the other key distinction, and this is critical, we can't cover this today, but get your mind around this. The economy is different from the financial system our entire world is based on. Those are two different things. The financial foundation has to do with our money being fiat currency that is actually debt and not an asset. And what's happening in the economy has to do with the way people and businesses every day interact with each other at a profit. And so there can be certainly cycles and dips in industry. Entire industries get changed and uprooted and disrupted, which is great and scary both at the same time. But the financial system that we're in is a rigged system. And not to be a conspiracy theory guy, because I'm not that guy, it warrants some study. Right?
It's just what it is.
It is what it is. We can't do anything about that other than learn how to play alongside it.
So stay with us on Real Estate Radio Power Investing with Robert Helms. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Power Investing. Streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, visit TomWilsonProperties.com. That's TomWilsonProperties.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Power Investing, Tom K. Wilson.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Radio Power Investing program with Robert Helms today in the studio at Wilson Investment Properties corporate headquarters here in Silicon Valley. So, Robert, we've talked a lot on this program today about diversity of education and content and a variety of asset classes that you should consider and not just be focused on one. So, we don't have time to talk about all of them. We've mentioned them, but let's talk about within real estate. Most people start off with buying just rental houses, and turns out there's some more things available than that, and even if you don't have the money for one of these bigger deals. So what do you think in this market with our kind of agreement conclusion that investing in real assets is a good hedge against whatever's coming up? What's been your experience, and what are your thoughts today?
One of the great things about real estate is it can hedge against both inflation and deflation,
which is hard for some people to get their head around.
It sure is, but it's one of the great tenets of real estate. So probably a longer discussion than we have for today. But if you just do the what if scenario, if we see inflation or deflation, understand how real estate values benefit when prices go up, but also how real estate preserves when prices, should they deflate, go down, and people have more purchasing power. You still get your loan paid off by your tenants. And not only that, over time, the tenants, if you do it right, pay off all the mortgage. So
and you still get cash flow.
And you get cash flow. And even if I bought a property at $100,000 and 30 years later it's worth $50,000, which I can't imagine happening, but if that were true, that's $50,000 of free money, and I have the asset, and it's a hard asset. So that's the short version of deflation.
So we've about run out of time on this program. So I just want to thank you, Robert, for being on, and remind everyone to go to wilsoninvest.com and sign up for our newsletter that gives updates on the economy as it applies to the different asset classes and real estate that we've been talking about. Also, by so doing, it gives you access, makes you part of our community, and gives you then access to the syndications that we filter through literally thousands to find the best nuggets and underwrite them conservatively that you can invest in for $50,000 a share. And you have any questions about that, want to learn more about it, there's a lot of information on the website. There's our 6 years of radio show, or not quite the 22 that Robert Helms has, but we're working on catching up.
You're catching up, man.
And so we encourage you to do that. And also baycom.club is one of our education venues. If you happen to be in reach of Northern California, there's also online content for that for education. And also, Robert, tell people how they can connect with the Real Estate Guys.
Well, the easiest way is go to realestateguysradio.com. You can learn about us. You can subscribe to our podcast. And we've got a whole section of free reports. In fact, one that you've just put out that I'm excited about commercial real estate and how you can invest in that and learn a lot about it. You're always a great educator. And so we asked you to do a report, and you'll see it in the resource section, or you can send an email to CRE, that's commercial real estate, at realestateguysradio.com, and you get a copy of Tom's report and white paper on investing in commercial assets.
Super. Thank you, Robert. It's been great having you on. Always good to have time with you. And so thank you. And remember, the only thing that matters is what you do next.
I've got the power.